Sometimes you find that perfect keyboard for yourself. It sounds great out of the box. It looks great with its RGB. It has those features that you want, and the typing feel is absolutely perfect for you. And on top of all of that, it unifies your entire RGB setup because it uses a piece of software that can communicate to other pieces of software that actually allow you to unify the inside and the outside of your computer case along with any of the RGB lights in your system. And then you go ahead and you pour a nice coffee into it and completely ruin it. And then you gotta get a new keyboard. Now, I could have just bought, well, the same keyboard twice, since if it was good once, it would be good a second time. But this is a YouTube channel, and the problem with the YouTube channel is you guys can't watch the same video twice. So instead, we got this, which is the new, most expensive keyboard on Razer.com. This is the Razer Black Widow V4 Pro 75%. And that extra word Pro increases the price exponentially. So let's find out if adding an OLED screen and wireless connectivity to my favorite keyboard of last year actually changes anything and makes it worth the new price tag. Let's get right into it. Hello and welcome. My name is Wolfie and you're watching GreaterThanPie. And today we're looking at the Razer Black Widow V4 Pro 75%. Wonderful name, rolls right off the tongue. So what's new about this keyboard versus the Razer Black Widow V4 75%? Well, two things. One, wireless, and the second one is this OLED screen instead of the media keys that were there prior. There is still a scroll wheel and some extra buttons all around. It's hot swappable. It's got an optimized typing experience with typical Razer branding, an OLED display. We'll see how that affects things. And of course, the version I picked up uses the Razer Oranges because, well, they're actually pretty good keyboard switches. And the only other real major change that is between this version and the previous version, there's actually an FR4 plate in here in the stack instead of it being, I believe it was just a steel one before. Same amount of foam, so you shouldn't really have much case ping. And it also comes with a wrist rest, which I think the other one did too. Not entirely sure, but it's not the cool RGB wrist rest that came with the Huntsman Pros. Yeah, let's get into the box.
So we got our box here for the Razer Black Widow Pro 75%. It's standard Razer affair, pretty high quality, and it's got that nice little pull tab that makes it a little bit easier to get inside of. So now that we got the box open, you can see the keyboard right here, front and center. This is Razer's kind of typical presentation. And then underneath here, we have all of our accessories. That's the setup guide, and it's, yeah, you can see there's a lot of configurations here. We also got a user manual, which also shows you how to remove the switches. And I didn't notice it, but there are stickers in there as well. I thought they gypped me of my stickers. Then we got a wrist rest, and it's, well, it's pretty standard. It's got a hard bottom, plush top. It's that kind of like faux leather stuff that Razer likes to use a lot. It is magnetic, so it will attach to the keyboard. But most of the time, I just don't use wrist rest these days. And then in these boxes, this contains our switch puller. And this is like my favorite switch puller. It is just great. I love it because it's really easy to take those keycaps and the switches out. Then we also have our USB dongle extender. So this actually is supposed to connect to a USB extension cable and then sit kind of close to the keyboard. And then this other box is our USB cable. So that's everything that comes in the box.
Now we got this out of this box. Let's take a quick look around. So we've got a switch up here. The switch is between the 2.4 and the Bluetooth connection. And then there's also a wired connection button along with what looks to be like a reset of some kind. Nice that you don't have to take this apart. This is big, really big wireless connectivity module right here on the back. Our cord is offset this time, which is kind of nice. And it's marked. This outer aluminum case though is a fingerprint magnet. We got kickstands with 2 stages of height adjust, along with rubber feet, which is actually pretty nice. Looks like all of our screws are very much visible, except for one that's got a sticker on it. It's probably just to show that you did open up the keyboard for RMA purposes. We also have a button and a dial over here on the side, along with all of our keyboard switches, which, you know, we got to do a sound test. Now, you'll notice that this has a different sound than the previous version. The previous version was a lot more thocky, and this one's a lot more poppy. And that is thanks to this plate underneath here. Now, this plate does two things that's actually really cool. One, it helps the RGB illuminate a little bit better since it's a white color. And since it's FR4, it actually reverbs the sound back towards you a little bit. And that creates a sort of poppy sound. Now, this is another gasket mount, and it does have a good amount of flex to it, so the type feel is great. And that poppy sound isn't really something that I hate. It's probably modifiable with a different plate, or even just taking the plate from the old one and putting it in there. But the additional RGB illumination is kind of nice. These switches are hot swappable, but they are north facing, which means that you may have some issues if you try to put GMK keycaps on here. And they are a box style switch, probably actually manufactured by Kale. The normal face typing is actually pretty good. It has nice visible legends all along the top, and along the front, there are additional legends, which is, again, just very nice to have, especially when you have a condensed keyboard like this. You may have noticed though, that there's a little bit less rattle in the space bar, and that is because this now utilizes, and I love that it does, screw-in stabilizers. Yeah, they didn't really have to change the actual circuitry to do that since they had already designed a board that had them on there, but the new version does have them. And it does contribute to a lot less rattle. Like, this is me shaking this thing at full force. You're not hearing much from it. And it doesn't really have a lot of flex on the top plate, since this is like a full aluminum shroud, and then the rest of it is actually nestled nicely on the inside there. Turn it on so you can see that RGB. Look at that.
Okay, guys, we're now here in the newest version of Razer Synapse. This is kind of exclusive to only a couple pieces of equipment from Razer. And so the keyboard and mouse that I'm running are two of them. So as per normal, you can select any key, you can map it to anything. And you also have Hypershift, which allows you to do the same, but on a secondary layer, which can only be activated by pressing the function key. But there are functions that you can do, you know, combinations, macros. You can make macros too. Gaming mode disables the Windows key, Alt Tab, on Alt F4. You can actually select whether or not these do what they do. Gaming mode can also be activated from inside of the keyboard at any time. There's a macro to do it. Snap tap is actually a really cool feature. It's a lot better on the optical keyboards, but it is considered cheating in some games. So what snap tap does is it allows you to override the input of one key press with another key press simultaneously. So think about strafing left and right to dodge in something like CSGO. And what happens with snap tap is you actually have the ability to sort of roll the keys in a way that would be humanly difficult and technically impossible. And so there's a lot that goes into it. Keyboard switches are not perfect. They don't release at the same time as you release them. There's a spring that has to go up. So there's like a little bit of latency there. There's a little bit of human error. And this can reduce the latency on the keyboard side so that the trigger doesn't have to actually reset in order for it to be pressed. So essentially, if you're holding A and D and you release D, the A will activate. And if you press D again, it will activate the D. It is complicated, but for those who know how to use it, it is a deadly tool to the point that it is banned in some games. Polling rate. We can actually go up to a 4,000 hertz polling rate, which I did not do on here. I've only been running it at 1,000 hertz, and 1,000 hertz is more than enough. If you need a 4,000 hertz polling rate, you know if you need it. You are a competitive gamer and you really need that competitive edge. And that is also on wireless, which is pretty cool. But that that will kill the battery very, very quickly. Now, I did have an issue with the command dial at first, and that's because I really didn't use anything here except for volume. And then I went to Razer Synapse and found out that you could turn off everything but volume. And so I did. You could also move these around so that they change order. Very, very cool. Like, there are some pretty useful things in here. The problem is just this command dial. I'll talk about it later, but it's not my favorite feature on this keyboard. Of course, you got your basic lighting effects, but if you really want to get going, you go into Chroma Studio and you got all of these effects. And as you can see, we got a lot of lighting zones. We got all of the keyboard keys because we got per key RGB illumination, and we also have illumination on the sides. So overall, just really cool. And if you have never used Chroma Studio, it's really good at making pretty much any RGB effect that you could want, minus some more advanced ones that I think take special coding to do in the first place. The OLED screen can be customized to a degree. There's like animations, images, emotes, banners. Yeah, very, very gamer-y banners. This one's kind of cool. The audio track mixer, where it like shows the audio track and like sound waves. If you match that with like Wallpaper Engine, you can have a pretty good aesthetic going. Personally, I keep it on System Info, in which I have this set, and you can select any of these variables into any of these spots. There's also keyboard info, which is really useful as well, especially if you're using this primarily as a wireless keyboard. You also get a little battery indicator up here, which is pretty cool. There's also a screensaver. Again, if you are running this wirelessly, probably should not even need to use that because the screen will just turn off when it's not necessary. And personally, I'd rather just wake the screen when I want to check something versus it always having something on it. And then finally, we have the power settings because this is a wireless keyboard. So there are a lot of features here that pretty much are just here to keep the keyboard from killing itself quickly. So wireless power savings, 15 minutes, the keyboard will turn off, dimming the lighting, lower battery warning display. One of the cool ones is on the dongle. You can actually set the battery status to show kind of like a DS battery. And that, I love that feature. I really do. And so I could just kind of look over and say, oh yeah, I'm about 50% battery now, aren't I? If it starts blinking red, then you know you got a problem. But overall, just really cool features that you can tweak to this keyboard. And overall, like the new improvements to Razer Synapse have been great. So you've heard how it sounds. You've seen how it looks. You saw what's in the box, but how does it game? And well, I'm happy to say she games. This keyboard is actually pretty impressive. And I am downright impressed with the progress that wireless keyboards have made. We tested Muse Dash, which is actually a very input latency sensitive game, and it's within a close enough margin of wired that I could not tell the difference between wired and wireless connections. That alone means that we got latency that doesn't have to be accounted for, which is great. And this was at the 1000 hertz polling rate with RGB turned on and a pretty full battery. We also tested Doom Eternal, which when I play a game like this, what I'm looking for is specifically, does the keyboard disappear in my brain? So while I'm playing it, are my inputs fast? Do I have to hunt for certain keys? And do they feel natural? And yes, they do. It actually did a really good job on a wireless connection, keeping up with the fast inputs of Doom Eternal, and the comfort of the keyboard was actually great during that gaming session. I then did a marathon gaming session where I played for an entire day just to really see how good that battery is. And I have to say, it's a little disappointing. You can't quite get an entire gaming session of multiple hours. It was probably close to like 12 hours of gaming in without having to plug it in. And so if you are one of those gamers who does marathon game, just make sure that your cable is close by and routed to where you're actually going to be playing. And honestly, I recommend having it set up that way anyway, since the closer the dongle is to the keyboard, the faster the response is going to be. That's why they have the extender. I've actually gotten quite a bit of gaming on this device already, and it's got a lot of really, really good things, and it's got some really, really baffling things. And the funny thing is, the good things about it are the same things that are good about the wired version. It sounds great. It performs solidly. The RGB is unified and it connects to everything. The RGB on this one though is a little bit better, and it's actually thanks to that FR4 plate underneath here. And
I actually think that the poppy sound is actually really nice. Though again, that's gonna fall into preference. The new feel of the stabilizers is great since they're all screw-in stabilizers. And the keycaps actually have a sort of rough, almost ABS feel, which makes them a little bit more premium than the previous versions. The wireless is super, super fast, super, super responsive, and it works about 90% of the time. So when it's connected to the dongle, it does work pretty well. The Bluetooth connection can be a bit spotty, but that is Bluetooth and Windows, and I will never blame Razer for that because even Microsoft's own controllers have problems with Bluetooth and Windows. But on the wireless connection, things are a little janky. And that's partially due to the fact that Razer really didn't think ahead about possibly putting in like a Qi charger or something onto the bottom here that would have allowed this to charge wirelessly with like say a Qi charger underneath a desk mat, like say the one that's right here on the desk. But the point is, because of that, you do have to plug your keyboard in to the computer that is also connected to the dongle that is probably connected to the cable that you're using to charge. So you have to unplug the dongle to plug the keyboard in, which means you have to leave enough slack on that cord so that you can move your keyboard around and reach to pretty much exactly where you want it in order to cable manage it properly. Luckily, you can use the keyboard and charge it at the same time. That works perfectly fine. And you might be asking, well, what about my cool custom coiled cables? You're probably not gonna wanna use those. And that's because this does require the use of USB 3.0, which means that a lot of those cables, which look really, really nice, aren't gonna work. A lot of them actually only run at USB 2.0 spec, and the dongle requires that extra speed and that extra power. So you're gonna be stuck with a Razer Black cable. It's not the end of the world because it's subtle and it disappears. And ideally, you're using this wirelessly most of the time, or else you're better off just buying the wired variant. The OLED screen looks beautiful. It really does. It works great. The contrast is amazing. The text is perfectly legible, and it has some cool features. Like I have mine set to show my system specs when this is all plugged in. The problem isn't necessarily what the OLED screen can do, but rather what it does by default. So it's actually a menu for everything you can do with this dial. And you can do a lot. You can do zooming in and out. You can do skipping tracks. You can do volume. There are a couple things else like backlight control. The problem is how you access the menu and, well, actually work through it. Intuitively, you would think that you would take this button on the side to activate the menu, and then you would scroll through here and then press the button to confirm your selection. Unfortunately, it doesn't work that way. The way that it works is you have to press this button until you get to the selection that you want, and then the dial will do what you selected. And the only reason this is kind of a problem is because it's designed in a way that makes it look like it's supposed to be scrolled through, and there is no way to scroll back. So if you pass it, you're going to be pressing the button until you get to the thing that you want, which, if it sounds tedious and annoying, it is. And the worst part is, by default, it should do volume, but for some reason mine doesn't, and it immediately goes to track switch, which, if you're listening to music, it's annoying. So the standout features that make this a pro keyboard really aren't the best, and they're actually hindering it ever so slightly. But I would still recommend it for certain people. If you've got a need for a wireless keyboard that is hot swappable, sounds this way, it's great. And it honestly is good. I think Razer can fix this whole OLED screen problem and the software in there. Razer Synapse's most recent version is amazing. Razer Chroma's most recent version is amazing. And this thing runs off of both of them. The wireless functionality works great. So the core function of this thing is good. There are just some software bugs to work through. The problem though is that price. And that price is mainly due to that screen. Putting an OLED screen in there does drastically increase things. And while the quality is there and it does, feel good in the hands, it works as you would expect, it's hard to justify it. But that's where I'm gonna end today, guys. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you in the next video. Wolfie.